How you doing? Wonderful. Really good to see you all. For those of you who are back, apologies. We're kind of rammed today. So I guess if you want to try and squeeze yourself on the side here, there's a bit of space here. There's a little bit of space over here and a little space, tiny space on the left there. But if you're happy standing there because you're near the bar, that's fine by us as well. Okay. Who's here for the first time? Hands up. Cool. Where you been hiding, man? But you're welcome. For those of you who are here for the first time, this is CDR. You're welcome. The Night of Ideas and Tracks in the Making. My name's Tony. I'll be talking with this wonderful gentleman shortly, who some of you may know. But yeah, this night has been going for a while now. And the whole point of the night is to create a space for producers and artists and people who love music to hear great music that's in development. Give it a shout out to all the producers who brought tracks down. Round of applause. Amazing music as always. Yeah, and obviously it's a great place to navigate this music industry with, cool people and people who believe in electronic music. So it also gives us the opportunity to talk to great people like this guy here. Give up for Midland. And to obviously get to know a bit more about them as human beings, but also for us, a bit about their production process and why they make the music they make. So yeah, how are you doing, sir?
Good, thanks. It was a bit of a challenge to get all my projects working on my laptop because I don't use my laptop.
Yeah, because you're kind of desktop kind of guy, right?
I am, yeah. But actually this is good because one of my sort of New Year's resolutions was to use my laptop a bit more. And I'm going to be away a bit longer this year for various things, and I quite want the chance to just work on stuff.
Have you got your redundancy strategy sorted out yet? Yeah. Bar redundancy, you got
Not yet. Just clinging on for dear life.
I hear you. So before we kind of dig into on the music side of things, tell us a little bit about, you're obviously passionate about music. We're all passionate about music here, but what got you into music? When did you decide that music is the thing that you wanted to spend a lot of time on and, develop as a career?
Truth be told, it was never actually a conscious decision. It kind of I just sort of followed paths and it just happened to become a career, I guess. But I mean, music was part of my life from the very beginning. My brothers and sisters are a lot older than me. So, my brothers were going to like tribal gathering, Shelley's, term mills. So I was just surrounded by a lot of really great music in general, and they were making me tapes all the time, so it was just always a part of my life.
So they were the fans, but you were the person who actually converted that fandom into something a bit more holistic, I guess.
Well, I mean, my eldest brother Dom actually wrote quite a lot of pretty big house records in the 90s under the alias Sugar Pussy, which probably would have gotten cancelled, but they were wicked. They were kind of like cut up filter house stuff that was getting played at term mills and stuff by like people like Tony DeVete and stuff. But yeah, I guess I sort of ended up taking it to this point.
So let's go back to say your first release. What was the path to your first release? I mean, what made you go, I'm going to do this, even though it's something that I'm passionate about, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I was at university in Leeds, and I got a pair of decks just before I went. And effectively, I was just working in a canteen from sort of 7 in the morning until 1, and then just spending the entire afternoon I was literally in my room on my decks from like 1 until bedtime, just practicing. I'd had some like CD, the kind of dual CD things, which I'd used to just play at like school parties and stuff, but. So I got really into that, and then I moved to Leeds and I recorded this mixtape, which I gave to someone called Shock, who ran a pirate station called Radio Frequency. And effectively, I would just stand next to him at the rave, just naming all the tracks and being like, that guy, just like buzzing. I was at every rave, and he just was like, oh, just shut up, have a set. So he gave me like the graveyard shift on a Friday night from 2 till 4. So basically, I'd go down on the bus, I'd walk 2 miles into this like rough estate where there was like an industrial estate. There'd be cars, there'd be like sex workers. It was pretty spicy. And then I'd play to like 10 people, and then I would walk to the bus, get the bus to the top of the like town, and then I'd give the keys to the next person. I did that for like a year. Anyway, so through that, I started playing at loads of clubs in Leeds, like SubDub, West Indian Centre, Metropolis. I was just, I started through the radio getting booked at these things, and then just sort of bought Logic and was just sort of making music or trying to learn how to make music. I was also living with Pearson Sound, and we lived together for about 6 years, but we were kind of just doing very different things. And just to kind of rush forward a little bit, me and him basically we'd just finished uni, and I went to stay with him in his parents' house, and we sort of just started working on these house tracks, one of which was called Your Words Matter, which got signed to House, which sort of sounds like Todd Edwards. And off the back of that, then I got hit up because that got released, and kind of a few people started inquiring. Then I got hit up by Phonica, the record shop, and Play the Game, I guess, was like the first solo thing I did. But because I'd been making and playing drum and bass religiously, you can hear it in there, because I all I was doing was chopping up breaks and learning how to do that. So this was basically just like...
Should we have a listen?
Yeah, sure. I might skip forward a little bit. Yeah? Okay. Cool. I know, it's just very quiet beginning. Dynamic contrast, that's a good one.
Hint, guys.
Yeah. Okay. Might need to go up a little bit. There is a vocal.
Yeah. Nice.
Feel like that. Is that should that have been? Is there? Are we all right? Should that have been louder? Not. I don't care. But you were looking.
It could be louder. Okay, wait. Well, the next one.
Okay. No. You were just giving. I was wondering if something was going wrong with my side.
So was that release, say, representative of the kind of things that you're playing as a DJ?
Honestly, what I was playing as a DJ then was a bit chaotic, because I came from drum and bass and then sort of started releasing.
When
house.
You say, I mean chaotic as in just like intense kind of break stuff?
No, chaotic as in like it didn't really have much, like it didn't really make a lot of sense in terms of like, I came from playing drum and bass religiously and I was quite technically skilled, but I didn't really quite understand how to program a set as a sort of house or slower DJ. And that took a lot of time and more patience. You know, it wasn't just like double drops all the time, because that was kind of my style. It was just like sort of just, you know, youthful showing off. I remember once entering this DJ competition, and I was the only drum and bass DJ who got to the final. Some guy handing out flyers on the street was kind of like, "Oh yeah, do you want to come to this?" And I was like, "Oh, who do you think will win?" He's like, "Not the drum and bass." And I was like, "Well, I did." But I'm not actually that competitive, but what I'm saying is...
Oh, really?
Well, it's a very competitive scene in a way. Pirate radio was all about like having the best dubs and like, you know, getting a better set, and it was all it's a lot of kind of competition, right? And so I guess I just I got quite competitive.
Yeah. So what was the scene like for those of us who weren't in Leeds, 2010ish, what was the scene like?
The scene in Leeds was like probably, I would argue, as good as London, equal. It was a crazy time to be there. You had Exodus at the West Indian Centre, which was the only other place that they did DMZ. You had nights like Back to Basics and Loosh, which were bringing up, a lot of these house and techno DJs for the first time, like Zip and Ben Clark, all the DJs from Berlin. It was ridiculous. You were spoiled. And then obviously you had just like SubDub every week at the West Indian Centre, which was just like a religious experience for us. And we would go at least twice a month for the entire time we were there. And then also nights like Roughage, which the Hessel Audio guys were putting on. And I was obviously like living with David and friends of Ben and Kev, and they were doing radio in my room in first year. So yeah, it was quite funny.
You were immersed essentially.
Yeah, by accident. Just happened to be like the reason I lived with David Pearson Sound was he just saw me in my halls. He was in the same halls as me, and just saw me on my decks and just knocked on my door and said, like, do you want to have a mix? And that was the start of living together for sort of the best part of 7 years. Amazing.
So I guess your path into music has been quite serendipitous, it's kind of like, you happen to be DJing, you happen to have a, influential, roommate, you happen to, so from this happenstance and coming up with, this sound, because it's obviously a lot more down tempo than chaotic drum and bass.
Yeah.
So why the need for you to kind of, go in this direction for your kind of early release?
I mean, I just kind of got to a point with drum and bass where I felt a bit like boxed in by it. I just didn't like, it was at the time when Instrumental and D-Bridge and stuff were all doing that stuff on Dark Estral. And it was so like, it was like they kind of took it to like, in my mind, as far as it could go. And even like D-Bridge, and I think Bodica said, like, it just kind of, when they did Watching You, that was the end for them. And I kind of had been feeling that way, just like it was so limited in its tempo that I basically kind of just took a break from music for about 3 months over one summer between uni, and kind of did this like walk across Spain called the Camino de Santiago, which is like a old pilgrimage route, and didn't listen to music for 30 days. And then I came back and
slightly less, more chilled.
Yeah, exactly. And I just came back and I was like, oh wow, look, there's all this other music that I've been ignoring. So yeah.
And in terms of your, I guess, building tracks in Logic at that time, were you pretty confident in terms of putting ideas together, or did you have to get support or mentoring or something?
Not at all. It was really hard because Logic just had a really steep learning curve. And Logic now is much more intuitive, even though when I say I use Logic, people are like, eh? Like everyone seems to use Ableton. But I love Logic, actually. I think once you can kind of crack it, it has a really great interface and a great sound. But yeah, when I first was doing it, there were people in Leeds who would help me out, like a few producers who were like older than me, who were in like third year at uni, who would offer a lot of help. But a lot of it was just going on forums and just going on production forums or that sort of thing, and like just like cobbling it together myself. And I don't, it's like they say you have to put 10,000 hours in to kind of get to a point where you're slightly in control of what you're doing, whether it's DJing. And I definitely had that point with DJing. And the same with production. I'm only really like in the last few years really felt like, okay, I can actually do some things, have an idea, execute it.
So when you hear that track now, how does it make you feel?
Old. No. I really love it. Yeah. I mean, I used to be a little bit less kind on my back catalogue. But I think that's just like a life imitating art.
Yeah, I mean, we all have to be proud of what we put in the world,
Totally.
It's part of our development, right? So,
and I think you've got to really you got to be kind to every version of yourself in order to progress. So yeah. Yeah.
So I guess from here on in, you kind of, released labels on House, of course, more records on House, and other labels. You spent a lot of time on other labels, so how did that journey develop in terms of working with other labels? And then what made you, when did you decide to, I'd say, start graded yourself and obviously regraded? Yeah,
I just kind of got to the point where with the house, there was kind of like a release schedule, and it was maybe just like a desire to get something out a bit earlier, have a bit more control over the artwork. The visual aspect has always been very important to me. And, just sort of like try doing it myself. I mean, I say myself, but like, try giving it a go.
And how's it been? How's it been running a late? What's the setup for Graded?
I mean, I run it with my manager, Chris, who I've worked with since the beginning, pretty much the beginning.
Big up, Chris.
Big up, Chris Gold. And yeah, I mean, we don't put out loads of music. We haven't put out we're not really putting out music by other artists at the moment, just because just didn't really have the bandwidth, and I was kind of just feeling like a bit like got to the pandemic and I just felt very sort of burnt out. And so right now, just kind of leaving Graded for my own stuff. And you know what, like if those are the records we released, I'm really proud of that catalogue. And I don't feel like I just need to fill the space for the sake of filling the space. If a record's right, then we'll release it.
And when you say bent out, is that because you have your tour schedule and just other? Yeah. So what's the life of Midland like? When it comes to music touring or the remixes, etc.
I guess it's probably before what it was like was chaotic. Again, that word comes up a bit, but just in terms of traveling a lot. Being very lucky to be asked to travel a lot, not really knowing how to say no, because that you're kind of fed that idea that if you say no, they won't ask again. To some extent, maybe that is true, and I think there are periods where you have to just really like work. But I think I just got on the treadmill a bit too much, and yeah, I think as time's progressed, I've got better at saying no, maybe a little bit too much. But yeah, I think there's more balance now, and I kind of had this theory that the more space you create and don't fill, then often things kind of pop up, but like usually like a bit later. If like you don't make any plans on a weekend, you end up like accidentally like linking up with a friend you haven't seen who's always really busy, just like last minute, like which wouldn't happen if you'd filled it. And I kind of feel that way about where I'm at right now, just like not booking things too far in advance, not just jumping into things and sort of seeing what happens.
It's kind of a reflection of where your music's gone the last few years. I mean, it's gone, I think, we'll obviously play something from your 2023 EP shortly, but it feels to me, how has your music kind of developed in the last few years? What's kind of egged on the journey that you've gone sonically?
I think I had this song, which everyone or most people probably know, called Final Credits, which was just like accidental hit, sort of went further than I anticipated, and then further than that, and kind of in one sense, wow, that's great, doesn't always happen. On the other hand, it kind of was like just something I kind of cobbled together, and I listen to it now and I'm like, wow, that was quite fast, it was quite long, nothing really happens for the first 3 minutes, like shouldn't really have like connected in the way it did. And like at the time 133 BPM was fast, and there was lots of people like on YouTube being like, it's too fast, it sounds way better at 124, which it doesn't. But
to be clear,
like not to be a tyrant, but it's just that it's meant to be like falling off the train tracks a bit. But the thing was, as that came out, I was actually in the studio really going deep into sort of like signal chains and processing and sonics and space. And I guess in one sense, it kind of bought me some time, because I actually didn't release a record for 3 years. But on the other hand, it kind of just freaked me out a bit, because I knew that whatever I was going to release after that was probably going to like alienate some people, especially new fans. And for that first year, it was literally people coming up to me without saying anything and just taking photos, or one guy taking a photo of me at urinal in a club mid-set. Like I'm like just going to the toilet and he's there, takes a photo, like it's so stressful. So what I'm saying is that like, I know, poor you, people want to take your photo, but no, it just was like, it just was a kind of a funny junction to be in at a point when I felt like I was really getting into something quite deep. So yeah, I guess the next song I released after that, I didn't intentionally write it to sort of troll those people, but I think maybe it could have come across like that. Yeah.
How did you take to the attention that you got from that track mentally?
Pretty badly, honestly. Just gigs got busier, more pressure, and yeah, like just sort of ended up having like a few burnouts quite badly, but just sort of, I guess, kind of just like getting on with it. And then kind of having a really bad one, being away from home and actually like thinking, okay, no, I have to sort of make some changes and start really looking after myself and my mental health and doing therapy and all of this stuff. So, yeah.
And did your approach to writing also change because of this, burnout?
Yeah, I think I just was like, well, the reason all this is happening is because of my idea of all these expectations, and actually when you remove yourself from those expectations and you just listen to what's actually, inside, or what you just follow your ear, have fun, then you end up making music that's more honest and more fulfilling. And as someone who's always wanted to please people as growing up and stuff, it's like, it's hard to stare that down. But I think you lose people, but you connect with more authentic people who like are on a level with you.
Tell us about Drift.
Drift into the Algorithm. Actually, I might just play you the one on the record before our final credits, because I think that one's it's a nice stepping stone. This is called The Alchemy of Circumstance, the name of which is actually an Andrew Weatherall adage. Effectively, I saw Andrew Weatherall DJing once at the Lion and Lamb, and he was playing a Patrick Cowley record, and I'd never heard anyone play a Patrick Cowley record in a set like that. And I went up to him and I said, "Oh, I never thought of playing it like that." And he said, "Oh, it's the alchemy of circumstance, dear boy." And I thought that was such a cool response. It was like, "Oh, you can have that one for free." The other one was the tyranny of choice, which I think is quite a prescient thing to think about when making music. But so for me, the alchemy of circumstance, it's based on sampling, but it was actually me sampling myself. I had a little box which just made crazy noises, and I couldn't ever get that sound back. And this was just me, a live jam, which I then chopped up. I think the beginning of it sounds a little bit like final credits, the drums. So people maybe thought that was what was going to happen.
Very appropriate title, sure. Cool, nice one, man.
Thank you. I once I played that to my at the time agent Sandy. We were out in Croatia at Love International, and we'd it was like finished the festival. We were like, he was like, oh, I've got some cereal at my house. So we were like having some cereal with cold milk at like sort of 6 a.m. And I played that to him, and he goes, I couldn't play that to my mum. But yeah.
So briefly, before we obviously go into more music, which is fantastic. What was the thinking behind the building of that track? You know, what?
So the kind of that sound, which almost sounds like a printer jam, I think actually might have been a sample called Printer Jam, which I've just found somewhere on my computer. But it was like a little loop, and then I kind of left it, and I came back to it 2 years later, and I was like, oh, actually, this could be something. This is a good tip, which I also remember is that, like, sometimes your ears just aren't ready for an idea, and sometimes your ears get tired of an idea, and like I'm always putting ideas aside, you know, and I'm also going over old projects and bringing them, you know, into my current folder. And like I'm kind of in the habit at the moment of doing like morning pages, like how people write in the morning, just getting to the studio, half an hour, just whatever comes out. You know, it could literally be like trap, it could be hip hop, it could be drum and bass, anything, just like get it out. And it's kind of fun because also trying to challenge yourself to use a different synth or something. And with this one, I kind of then just got this little box which just kicked out these really crazy sounds and just recorded for about an hour. And then I just sort of chopped it up and was sort of layering it on top of each other. And the whole thing about that track is that the main synth line jumps in and out of like this quite tight reverb, which I love when you put a reverb on and you kind of bring the decay down. Or, you know, there's one on Logic called Platinum Verb, which is like an old one. It has this cool like setting where you can bring it into like the room. And I love it when it sounds like the track sort of goes into the next room. Yeah, and I actually DJ with a cathedral reverb, and sometimes I like to just bring the decay down and then just send the whole track to that, and it sounds like all of a sudden you're in the smoking area. And so yeah, this one was just kind of like messing around with panning and stereo, mono, and like I love messing with that stuff, and I think you can do so much cool stuff with it. And also, you know, realizing that if everything's in stereo, then it's sort of just like it doesn't really sound stereo because everything's wide. And I think it was Ewan Pearson, who I was once mixing a record with, who was sort of talking about the sort of 3D-ness of a record. And for me, it's always about like you've got like a room, you know, like you've got some friends over, like a dinner party. It's like if everyone's in one corner, it's going to be really loud, and actually like the vibe's going to be off. So you kind of spread them out. And so I'm always thinking about like the sonically where every sound is sitting, or more so these days.
And I guess you had time to really think about that with your, you know, I guess debut LP of 2024. Yeah. You know?
14 years in the making.
So why so long to make an album? And because you were working on EPs, why the decision to make an album?
The album just sort of came about, again, like as we spoke about earlier with my, I guess, entry into this world. It's just been, the album just sort of started to take shape in my head. And I never really felt like writing an album just as a statement for the sake of it. Like, oh, I've got to do an album now, because I feel that's a bit disingenuous. And yeah, I mean, I started writing the album and then lockdown hit, and I sort of spent, you know, we got new speakers, and I spent just couple of years listening to loads of crazy records, you know, like old Bjork records and Animal Collective, Herbie Hancock, all these records are crazy sonics, and sort of thinking like, that's how I want my records to sound. I want them to sound dynamic. I want them to sound really alive. And for a long time, the records have been a bit more like influenced by where I was, which is in the club. And I think trying to get that dynamism into club music is such a like dark art, but it's so satisfying. You know, I think someone like Floating Points is great at that. It's like really dynamic, but really alive, or like James Holden, or, you know, Nathan Fake. I don't know, a lot of those people who are kind of just like not kind of just wazzing it out. Technical term, to waz. So yeah, I had the time, and I just I was also aware that it was a very personal record. It was a funny one.
For what reason?
I mean, it's sort of exploring the AIDS crisis. It's exploring my discovery of the AIDS crisis. Not discovery, but I was always aware of it from a very early age, unfortunately, because a family member had HIV and a very dear person in my life had it. But just as I'd studied history at uni and I kind of got into it in a very historical way. And then it was also about clubs and finding my people in clubs, as a gay man, and also just, it was a whole lot of things, but it just couldn't be rushed. Although towards the end it was like, my husband was like, do I need to move out for like a week or two, just get it done?
So what was the writing process? I mean, you talked about, I guess, it all started with your listening and I guess laying foundations during the COVID, as with all of us. So where did it go from there? How's the writing process?
It's almost like most of the tracks I'd be sort of trying things out and then these tracks would just appear in a day. It's like, it's hard to describe, but some of them were kind of ideas that really required me to do loads of versions, but some of them just kind of dropped onto my lap. There was no real one way with all the tracks. Each one had its own vibe, and a couple of them, like the Arthur Russell one, that was very sampling. That was like sample based, sampling him. But then some of them, there's no samples. It's completely original. So yeah, it's just quite a kind of tapestry, I guess.
So what are we gonna hear now?
Well, we
break down.
We've got Drift Into the Algorithm, which was the sort of EP before, which might be nice because sonically I think it sort of...
I guess due to time, I think we should...
Let's do the album one.
And then come back to it.
I was like, I've got to be concise and failed. Also, getting all this to work on my laptop has been slightly challenging, so I hope it works. Yeah, it will. I chose this one because I thought from a production sort of standpoint, it's quite interesting, but also it's it's like some of the only ones that is all made on my computer, because a lot of them have synth lines from hardware or,
recorded in, right?
Yeah, recorded in or sort of triggered.
Yeah. So before we delve into it, give us some kind of insight into your setup for making this record.
So I've got few bits of outboard. I got 2 mono synths, Sequential Pro 1, Moog Sub 37, and then I have the Dave Smith Prophet 6, I believe, Moog Grandmother, and then just some little bits and bobs like modular. I'm definitely not going down that wormhole because I know myself.
Trust me, don't do it.
No. Everyone's like, yeah, it's fun, and then you won't write anything for 7 years.
And $7,000.
You have the look of a survivor. And then I have a Culture Vulture, which is wicked, which I kind of use for saturation and general stuff. Got a pedal board, 2 pedal boards, just with a bunch of pedals. Setting up a pedal board was so good for me because I always used to forget which pedals I had or just weren't in front of me, and now I can just be like, boom, done. And then I think that's it. I mean, and
it's all in the box, right? No summing mixers or anything.
So it all just goes into my sound card, which is the UAD. And that was one of the things that really changed my life, was getting a really good sound card. I remember someone saying that if you have a bad sound card and monitors, it's kind of like drinking champagne out of a paper cup. And actually, in the same way I say to someone who's in their late 20s, spend as much money as you can on a good bed or good sheets, spend money on a good sound card as much as you can, maybe just a little bit extra, because you can just hear stuff. And when I got the UAD, I was like, wow, they weren't lying.
And are you a UAD plugin fan? Do you use a lot of that?
I am a UAD plugin fan. Obviously, I can't really use any on here because I don't have my thing. But yeah, I do really like the UAD stuff. I use the Studer a lot. The Empirical Labs Distressor. That's one of my favorite compressors. I use the Ampex. I did use that one, which was just the magic button, which made everything really fat, but I just realized it was just boosting the low end. So I was like, probably just learn to do it myself.
So a lot of kind of tape saturation, tape in your mixes. You can definitely hear that.
Yeah, I like. It's a fine line with like tape fuzz, right? It can be a bit of a gimmick, like putting a cheap Instagram filter over something. But if it's done well, like, you know, I think it can add a dimension to it. Yeah.
Should we hear it?
Yeah.
Through the 90s, there would be several pages of obituaries of gay men you knew who sold you your beer or went out to dances with. You didn't know their names, but you always saw them on the dance floor. Our community, it definitely was based around dance floors. You would see people at bars and stuff like that, but you would go out dancing, and often this would be the only place you'd see them because you didn't know where they worked or anything like that. So yeah, dance floor communities being decimated was, you know, something I didn't ever expect as growing up as a child.
Yes, nice.
Thank you.
Break it down, man.
It's funny listening to this because what I do when I mix my tracks is I bounce everything out. Obviously, if you look at this, this is actually quite tidy by my standards, but when it comes to mixing, I find if I bounce everything out, it's just sort of like, 8 blocks look the same, and you can just really get, and also if you are lacking CPU, it's really helpful. All I'm saying is that's the kind of pre-mixed version. So I was like, the kick's a bit, the kick's a bit boxy. But yeah.
So maybe let's go through the elements, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I guess start with the rhythm section, I guess.
Yeah. So
well, first of all, let's start with the speech at the beginning.
Yeah.
So
this was just recorded on my. This was actually basically recorded on my phone in. I said I was in Sydney, and just before the pandemic, I went over to my friend Johnny Seymour's house, and we'd been talking about me interviewing him for ages because he has a pretty fascinating life story, and we just sort of set up the phone and recorded it. So the recording was like, he's quite softly spoken. It's like a rainstorm outside, and the phone probably wasn't close enough. And actually, that's what I learned with this album, was put the recorder closer, because the Luke Howard one is like, there's loads of sort of, when you boost the recording so much, there's quite a lot of artifacts. So yeah, this was an hour and a half interview, which I will put up on my website soon. So yeah, with the vocal, it's just a little bit of reverb, I didn't want to like mess with it too much. And then the rhythm section, I've actually just got like a drum bus. So yeah, with my drums, it's just like
Decimated was something I didn't ever expect.
So we've got the kick drum, which I have in battery, which is like kind of my sampler of choice. Again, it's so much about how it looks, very shallow. But I really like the envelopes, how you can mess with like the kind of tuning. It's really easy to sort of scroll through sounds. And then you've got, I'll just go in a bit. So you've got those kind of, I guess I call them dub delays.
That's really nice texture of this track. It's kind of undulating, consistently throughout the whole track. Is that the feedback that's keeping it at that?
So that delay is a plugin on Logic called Delay. It's called Delay Designer, which I love because you can kind of do quite cool polyrhythms with it. I put it on a lot of things. It's my secret out of the bag. I joke. Anyway, yeah, this was actually the one we were mastering, and Matt Colton sort of was like, kind of like a dub record, which I hadn't thought about. So yeah, you've got that, and then it's just it's kicks and that sound. I with the album, it's constantly like, what can you take out? What can you take out? Like, what is like taking up space? And also, I quite like to sort of my tunes. I always like them to kind of go somewhere, and you can introduce things. It doesn't always have to be all at once, and this is like probably my sort of advice to the younger producers is like, great track, but everything happens in the first 30 seconds. And I get that some music is like 2-minute track, I'm like obviously older granddad, but it's like, where's the story? What's it doing? And with this, it's like the hi-hats come in later. There's some other percussion that comes in these kind of modular bleeps. But then basically it's driven by this bass line, which is like very rhythmic. And that's from Sculpture, which is a Logic. Again, pretty much everything is like a sort of Logic thing. It's basically like modeled on a string.
Yeah, it's got a lot of low end for it's very clean sounding, isn't it? Yeah.
Well,
it's modeled, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like modeled
physical modeling.
Yeah, it's like physical modeling, and you can sort of mess with the sort of like where the pickup and do like cool stuff, sort of like which turns the sound into like like that sort of stuff. But I can't remember.
People have slept on this,
It's a bit gnarly, and if you like press something wrong, it just flips out. But I know D-Bridge used to use it a lot. I remember reading this. I think it was like something online about how string samples are really great for bass lines because you can pitch them down so far, and the sort of timbre of them like doesn't disintegrate. If you pitch like a bass sample or an 808, it has a limit, whereas strings are way richer. And so I really liked this because it sort of sounds alive. It's kind of percussive, but it sits really nicely with the kick. And I think that's something that I think held me back for so long, and often is the only, like, I do a bit of mixing for friends and like I master some stuff for mates, but like it's often like the kick just isn't right, and like it's kind of the foundation in dance music. And one of the best things I ever did was just spend a day finding 20 great kick samples. 20 great kick samples, 20 great snares. You don't need more than that. And then now I just have a really good set of those. It's like there's nothing more like creatively like that holds you back than like trying to go through kicks.
5,000 kicks.
Especially if you're doing a session with someone. I had a singer come in and my computer crashed and then I couldn't find a cable to plug in the thing, and it was just like, this is not a vibe, and like going through hi-hats is not what like Jessie Ware wants to do. She's like, I don't care. Actually just doing those sort of favors for yourself is really key. And for me, it's like, actually, if you can get the kick and the sub really in tune, then it's...
Is that in tune as in frequency wise, or as tune as in sonically?
Both, actually. I mean, like, tuning your kicks sometimes just a semitone up or a semitone down can just like completely elevate a track. Again, it's just making space, and in this track there's a lot of space, and the main star of the show for me is these pads, which I yeah, I really...
Definitely got some kind of flange or phaser on, right?
Multiple like, you know, there's one on each channel and then there's one on the master. Let me just go. They sort of sound a little bit like, I don't know, like a bit Daft Punky, actually. I just love... There's something when you put like a flange on like a real kind of like low mid sound, it just fills the space, but it doesn't take over, and it sits so nicely sort of on top of that kick as well, and that bass line, you know. They've all got their space, and like, you know.
What synth is that?
So the pads, sorry, the what's it called? Those low pads. It's the Mini V. It's the Arturia. Yeah. Again, like, it's just super simple. I love this synth because it's just. I mean, most synths are kind of doing the same thing, right? They're all just sort of like rooting it in a sort of. They're doing it in their way. That's how they get you. So, damn. Stop making things I want to use. No, but with this, it's just like, you know, I'm very visual, and the whole album was very visual to me, and I just really like how tangible it is. And yeah, I mean, these are all like the modeled on hardware. They're great synths, you know. So yeah, they're just stacked. One is high, one is low, you know, and often I'll do that. I'll split a sound. Sometimes now I have CPU. I'll have like multiple versions.
Good old Silicon Max there.
Yeah, you know, now I can like have like 4 Juno 8s, like all doing polyrhythms. But back in the day, I just didn't have that sort of power or like money to buy a computer that could handle that. And so often, you know, I would send a pad or a bass line, and you'd bus it to 3 different buses, and then you EQ it separately. So, you know, like quite a good trick with bass lines is you send it to one bus, which is mono, and you low pass it to about 150. That's the sub, right? And that's just, you can just compress it maybe. And then you got the middle, which is about, let's say 200 up to about 1K. That's the sort of mid-range. And then you can sort of do some cool like saturation, distortion. And then on the top end, you can add some like fuzz. And you can get really creative with like how you process the sound, because it's, you know, and on that, with that bass line, you have the middle and the upper bit in stereo, yeah. So yeah, but now obviously I have a bit more oomph. And then in the breakdown, I kind of like, the pads are held at this point. Then they start to sidechain, like they sidechain like in advance of the drop, I guess. So you'll hear them start to dip. It's just and that's just a trick I picked up somewhere, where you just basically have a channel with no output, and you just sidechain it off that. It's just a nice sort of like little trick that you can sort of use to do it. And then I guess and so yeah, like as I was saying about the development, the sub, well, the bass line obviously was just doing one thing, and then as soon as the second bit comes in, the bass line starts moving around, and that kind of...
Is that the same MIDI pattern, or is it separate?
No, I literally just like use the same channel, but then you can see like this is that's the kind of it's just doing a lot of things, and
very playful.
Yeah, and I think that was also inspired by who I was writing. Johnny is very, like, he nearly died a few times. He's very alive still, and I kind of wanted it to sound alive. And then, yeah, kind of the pads come back in, and then there's this kind of synth line, which unfortunately the synth just would not like transfer to my laptop. It kept on saying I hadn't authorized it. But this sort of, I don't know, for me it was a little bit like something you'd hear on like Warp Records or something. It's kind of got that sort
Boards of Canada vibe.
Yeah, Boards of Canada or like LFO or something. And that just sits really nicely, I think, on top of those kind of pads. They've all got their space. I'm actually working on some sort of like dubbed out, beatless, whatever versions of the album.
So that little Is that from the kind of syncopated really quickly? Just before, I guess between 113 and 17.
This.
Okay.
So this is the MIDI for that.
Yeah, cool.
So nice. It's kind of like descending arpeggios. Yeah. I did GCSE music, and I remember it's like cadences, perfect, plagal, imperfect, blah blah blah. Yeah. That's actually one of the few things I remember. But I mean, I was in a choir for quite a long time, so I was singing a lot when I was a teenager, but I don't read music, but I kind of can understand. I know what sounds good, I guess. So yeah, and then I guess there's a few extra bits of percussion that come in, but it's not, this is the thing. I kind of feel like for me, my mantra is like, if I can't achieve what I want to achieve in about 8 elements, then maybe it's not the right one. And I mean, it's different when you're working with a singer or something, because you're stacking vocals. That's a different vibe. But for me as a producer, it's like, especially in the last few records, my friend was like, there's not really much going on. And I took that as a compliment, because there used to be like a lot of camouflage, and I used to be like just putting stuff in to fill the space. It's like being mad on the effects when you're DJing. It's just an insecurity thing.
Was there anything particularly challenging about bringing this track to life?
I mean, the fact is I did about sort of 15 different versions, which all sound quite different. A few of them sounded like the end of like a Channel 4 documentary, like it was really sad and kind of just a bit like, and then with this one, I just was like, oh yeah, sculpture, great. And then the bass line just sort of was so kind of percussive and propulsive. And then just got home and I said to Mike, I think this is the version, and it was.
So was it the 15 versions to the one, or was it out of 15 there was one that worked?
I kind of feel like most of them are quite different, so it didn't lead me too much. This one was kind of like on its own, I guess. Yeah. And just sort of trusting my gut feeling on them. I think Arthur Russell used to say first thought, best thought. And I mean, obviously not saying the first one I did was the best one, but like the first thought about it.
So with I get the sense that you kind of similarly mix as you go, I guess, in terms of
no, I've always been of the kind of, I'm always sort of EQing as I go, and I'm kind of like, for me, that if the mix is sounding good, the track is sounding good, that's how I am. And sometimes I'll send a track to someone and they'll be like, when did you make this? I was like, this afternoon. They're like, sounds kind of quite close. And I'm like, well, it's just that I just like to get it done on as I go, because I feel like it's really hard to correct stuff. If you get too deep into a track, it can be quite hard. Like if you replace a kick drum, it just sends the whole track off. And so for me, it's like really getting the building blocks right. And I this was something that really held me back at the beginning, was just using the wrong sounds. They aren't like solid, or they aren't actually the one you wanted, and you just kind of cut a corner, or you're just impatient, or you just don't know.
So it is a lot about spending half a day on listening to 3,000 kick drums and coming up with 20.
Well, because actually now, like, that saved me in the same respect that like I tipped out all the cables in my studio last year and then organized them all. So now it's like, I know. But also for people who know me, they were like, "What? You did that?" Whenever
color coded,
not that far.
No,
I'll never be color coded.
No, okay.
But just like at least I know all my microphone cables are in there, all my like jacks, all my electrical cables. This is it's not sexy, but it does helps you out. And so with in the same respect, with a lot of my tracks, I spend a lot of time on signal chains, on buses, kind of getting them exactly how I want.
And is this, when you say buses, are they sub-buses? Are they auxiliary
like
buses
sends.
for effects?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So like maybe like it'll be like going to something which has like this was quite a hefty the dub delay. So it's going to a flange, the waves one, compressor, the Sony Oxford limiter, which I really like because it has, it's a great limiter, but it also has this like saturate enhance thing, which kind of fills things out a bit. But yeah, like again, like Logic just has so many cool Logic has so many cool inbuilt like amps, like the amp designer. I've been using that a lot on my bass lines and stuff, and it just adds this kind of like guitar-y crunch, but it's not that audible. So yeah, getting all of your ducks in a row and then going from there.
And I guess you do have a set of your kind of go-to, in the same way you have go-to sounds, do you have go-to plugins for specific purposes? So you've obviously your tape group.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your kind of go-to reverbs? And
I mean, I love, I use the Fab Filter Pro R quite a lot. That's got like loads of nice ones for drums, like on Ascend. I use Space Designer. I use loads of Logic stuff, honestly. Like, I kind of feel like if you know everything inside out on your doorstep, and I always think about people like, you know, early techno people, you know, like the Belleville 3 or like Carl Craig making these crazy records on like samplers which had sort of 6-second memories, or like, you know, Kate Bush using the Fairlight, you know, just
5 seconds of sampling.
Yeah, I think like 10cc used like 10 Fairlights to get that continuous loop of all the like kind of ambient backing. And yeah, that's the thing over lockdown. I was able to go into this stuff a bit more and learn about that sort of side of things. So, yeah.
Let's see if these guys have got any questions. If you do have a question, we have a roaming mic. Just stick your hand up and Sean will come and give it to you. Questions? One at the back there.
Next to the stack as well. I'm like, oh, we're going to have some feedback.
Got our...
Sorry. We had some feedback issues earlier, so everyone's a bit edgy.
Hi, just about your set at Houghton in 2022, which I still think is my top 5 sets I've ever seen. When you're backstage and you've obviously prepped for the set, do you maybe have an idea that you think, okay, that actually might work, I might experiment with this, or are you just going to stick with the plan that you've come with?
So there was no plan. I organize my music. This isn't to like, I'm not trying to big myself up. It's just how I DJ. I organize my music. You know, there's folders. Usually the most important folder for me is like the first one, like the start, maybe the first 2 or 3 tracks, they're planned. I have a folder called 100%. You know, these are the tracks. Just remember these are great. But honestly, just like following my nose, I really love that set, and it's one of the many sets that I love that they've lost the recordings. It's like almost to this point, like they just can't exist, and actually probably would ruin it. But thank you. But yeah, I think just followed where Shanti left me. It was a beautiful stage. It looked like a David Lynch film, you know, the red curtains. They gave me a pizza, had my shoes off, wicked monitors, sunset. It was kind of like dreamy, really. So yeah.
Thank you. A couple more over here.
What advice would you give to your younger self when you first started producing?
It's like RuPaul's Drag Race. Just go a bit easier on myself, and kind of enjoy the process, enjoy not knowing what you're doing. I feel like there's a period when you don't know what you're doing and you want to know what you're doing. Then there's a kind of period where you know some stuff and you feel like I should be doing this. And then there's that kind of fun part where you know what you're doing and you kind of then approach it like you are just a kid again. Or like for me, that's what I've been doing. You know, people tell you all these things you can't do. Like you can't reverb bass, you know, you can't do this. And actually you can do whatever you want. That's the kind of fun part of it. And I know it's like we're in this kind of era where you are online a lot. And I'm also, you know, I see this in myself. You see people where you want to be in your career, in your life, and social media flattens it. And it makes you feel inadequate for not being there. And I had this a few years ago and I was like, wait, why am I thinking this myself? Like as a DJ, like I'm comparing myself to my friends who are like in their 40s or 50s, you know? Yeah, I'm only 37 or I'm only 38, sorry. And yeah, I think you just got to like trust the process and not rush it, which is obviously counter to what everything seems to be like now. But yeah, if you put the time in and just enjoy it, I think then you just end up kind of ending up somewhere a bit more fulfilling.
I just wanted to ask about what you mentioned of processing the bass earlier, where you're sending it to 3 channels.
Yeah.
Are you treating that as a send and doing parallel processing and keeping the original recording, or is it just like...
So I would be using the synth, but you send it to three channels and then you turn off the output, I think. But effectively, yeah, each like channel is being processed, like you're processing the sound but from 3 angles. So one bus, I think, yeah, you bring every bus up to like 0. So everything is sent to 0, and then basically you EQ it, and that's how you kind of shape it, I guess. Yeah. A lot of my what I do is sort of self-taught, so trying to like vocalize it in a way that sometimes I'm like, this is probably going against like a lot of people who know what they're doing and saying, but yeah.
Let's also be able to think about music making, because it sounds good, right? So
yeah, exactly. If it sounds good, it sounds good.
Absolutely.
I know some people, I won't name them, but they once accidentally put a bounce of their track into the project, and then actually it kind of sounded really good, so they just like moved it a little bit so it's slightly phasing, and that track was actually 2 copies of the track just slightly phased. It sounded fat, you know. So yeah.
Hi. What do you think is going to happen in the next not only 10 years, but as we continue, developing these technologies that have the capability maybe of replacing human creativity in different fields? Do you think we as a species and humanity will eventually just like give up and start consuming the machine work, or will we stick there and yeah?
February 2025 vibes. I think that right now we're in this like Wild West stage with AI, and it's kind of mental, and you hear about all these sort of robot ghost tracks that are being flooding onto Spotify and stuff, and I think at the end of the day, I think we're probably going to see the end of a version of something like Spotify, or we're going to see, people leaving it. And I see this with my nieces and my nephews. My niece loves buying CDs from the charity shop, and she's like, Uncle Harry, do you know who Frank Ocean is? And I'm like, yes, Grace, this is great. And like got her like, getting a vinyl for Christmas, and she's buzzing. And I think there will never not be an appetite for humans to consume like tangible, flawed work, and that's the thing that like maybe I guess computers will start to be able to make it sound flawed and human, but like I think at the end of the day there's always going to be these cycles of people sort of chasing this thing and becoming sort of I guess sort of enticed by it, but then I think there's always going to be an appetite for things that are sort of tangible and handmade. So from my perspective, it's like, when I think about music and what I'm making, it's like I want to leave behind music that I am proud of, and I want to leave behind something that maybe someday someone will find and think, oh, that was really cool. But at the end of the day, like one day I won't be around. I won't know about it. It's just, I'll just be a blip on the sort of on the large tapestry of humanity. But I think just because the barriers to entry may be higher now because there's more people doing it and there are computers trying to steal our jobs, doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Hi. Over here. Do you ever get writer's block? And if so, how do you get past it?
Yes. Yes, I do get writer's block. In fact, I had a pretty spicy January of not writing any music. I think writer's block for me is often about comparing myself to other people or where I should be, like, and also trying too hard to make the thing happen. So many things for me inspire me that aren't just music, whether it's going to see a show, an art show, or reading a book, or I find myself very inspired by reading about the creative processes of people from different disciplines, you know. I was given a book on Lee Krasner, who is an artist who is married to Jackson Pollock, who is an amazing painter, and, you know, reading about stuff like that, or just reading about people making music from backgrounds that aren't similar to yours. Like, you know, obviously, like online, there's so much stuff. You've got all your CDR stuff. There's the RBMA lectures. You know, I've been just watching the RBMA lecture with Tony Visconti for the last few weeks during my lunch break. He worked on the Bowie records, T-Rex, everyone. Just hearing about stuff that he was doing, you know, recording vocals with 3 microphones, for instance, like one setup. If you sang at a certain level, the first microphone would pick you up. If you sang louder, it would hit the next one. And if you screamed, it would hit the very far end of the room. And then you'd have this different,
As a Bowie record heroes, you have to hear it. So it's amazing technique.
And T-Rex Cosmic Dancer, I think probably hand on heart, my favorite record in terms of the production and the sound of it. And just it's a funeral record for me. But yeah, I just find just dig outside your sandbox or something like that, and just trust that it will pass, hopefully. And get off the internet, get off social media. That's the one for me. It's it's killer.
Quick question. So it's a process question, chicken and egg. Thinking about your album that I've been listening to in particular today in detail, the sample tracks like this one, whether it's something that you recorded as an interview or found footage or historic footage, are you listening to the sample and creating a platform for the sample, for what it means, or are you using the sample to create a platform for the music you make? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. And it's the first. Every song is a world created for that person's voice. In the past, often I just would slap a vocal on a track that I found in the sample pack, and I guess that kind of came to its sort of peak with Final Credits, and then I kind of felt like, I don't know. There's a lot for me. There's also ethics about sampling, which I, as a younger producer, wasn't totally respectful of, or maybe just wasn't thinking about, you know. But obviously, Final Credits is fully licensed. Everyone's getting paid, but for me, it's actually, is that, I don't know. I felt like after that, sampling, I do still sample, but in a different way, you know, and I feel like I learned from that. So yeah, every track was just kind of built as a world for those voices.
Hi, I was just going to ask, as a DJ and a producer, do you sort of set yourself goals for yourself in terms of what I want to achieve in my output, both emotionally, just as a human being? Because as you say, in an era of social media where there's so much pressure, do you have to set yourself those sort of human things which you can be in control of?
I think basically it just comes down to setting myself, holding myself to standards of just doing honest work. I'd say that, not like a missionary. I mean just being honest to myself and what it is that I want to do, and trying not to let other people and what they're doing cloud. You know, I think I started at the beginning of January and I was like, haven't written a banger in ages. This album's sort of, you know, the album on one hand, you know, was well received and by a lot of people. Just some people just were like, what? Just really didn't couldn't get it. And I really tried to stay away from all that stuff. I just don't think it's worth it. But a well-meaning friend sent me a Reddit thread on a Saturday night in January, just before I was going to the studio for the first time in 6 months. And I clicked on it without realizing what I was clicking on. And then it was this thread about people discussing my album. And it was mostly nice, which is probably why he sent it. But some of the comments were what, complete character assassination. I can't believe that this is the guy who wrote Final Credits. I can't believe that someone who wrote a track that is so celebratory, which actually is funny because it's about breaking up with someone and not wanting to say it, could have written this. It was such an affront. But actually, Chris, my manager, who is often a very sage sort of balancing force in my life, was but it's good that you kind of, it wasn't just all middle. People were really, some people were really into it, some people really hated it. It's actually it's good to have really elicited these sort of reactions. So yeah, I genuinely have a pretty thick skin for it now, as you would do after doing it for 15 years. But you know, the first review you get, which just kind of trashes you, or it's like, I want to die. Getting trashed in The Guardian for a project I worked on, like 2 stars out of 5. It's like, oh, yes. You learn stuff about
moved
yourself.
on.
Yeah, no, I actually genuinely have. But yeah, I think just like not worrying about losing people and just doing what you sort of believe in, really.
Is there another question there? Yeah. Cool. And I think we've got maybe time for a couple more after that.
I was going to ask, how important is social media, and should we feed it if we hate it?
No.
As a career, I mean.
I think that, I mean, I don't use social media much anymore. You know, I obviously have a following. That's easier for me to say. But then you look at certain DJs and producers who are established. Someone like Helena Hauff doesn't have it, right? I think there's a way to interact with it. You know, you have to be honest with yourself. You know, for me, I decided to step back from it, and I just go on like once every 2 weeks and I post and try and make it more intentional. Like, this is what, like, trying to share maybe a few things. But I was saying to someone the other day that it's starting to feel a little bit with social media. Like, you know, now you can do 20 slides. You know, in like the Depression in like 1930s, when you saw people like paying for bread with like a wheelbarrow of like money, sort of feels a bit like that right now. It's like, you've got your wheelbarrow of money, which is just like content, and you're just like throwing it on the fire to try and get like likes or trying to get interactions. And actually it's sort of, you're just feeding. It's just like a kind of zero-sum game. And on a sort of spiritual level, I feel so at odds with feeding a machine that's run by Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or any of these vultures who are like literally destroying humanity. So for me, the kind of response is to build a website, which I'm kind of working on at the moment, with a mailing list, not so I can just spam people, just like I have stuff I want to share, and I find myself not sharing it on social media because I feel like insecure, or like it's kind of just it doesn't deserve my stuff. You know. And actually, like, if I can reach the same amount of people but without little likes or this kind of dopamine, that's for me more satisfying, and I would probably be a more engaged person if and when I can do that. Like, I want to share mixes, I want to I want to share photos, but I just, every time I go on, it just gives me the ick. So yeah, I think just trust what your gut is telling you about those things. And yeah, use it, but like don't sort of don't give it too much power.
First of all, right on social media. Secondly, you spoke about David Lynch earlier. Is there any particular like films or TV show soundtracks that have influenced your work over time?
So I actually really wanted to make films when I was younger. That was like my like passion. I was sort of like subscribed to Empire, and I had a little video camera, and I used to make films all through my teens. There's a lot of my friends' teenage hijinks, which are like in quite nicely edited like little films. But yeah, I was obsessed with films, and I still am. And I'm actually working on a mix right now of film scores and soundtracks. But yeah, I love film scores, and I think there are some really interesting people making stuff these days, like Mika Levy, who did Jackie and had did Under the Skin, a bunch of stuff, like really great modern, like classical. And then, you know, people like Michael Nyman, and obviously the classics, John Barry, Ennio Morricone. Yeah, there's like I think there's definitely like, for me, there's a sort of like sense of like romance and drama that I try and put in my music sometimes, which is definitely influenced by films. Yeah.
Time for one more, I think.
So as a queer artist, is there like, do you find that you're influenced by that queer sound? And if you are, like, what is the queer sound to you, if that makes sense?
I wouldn't say I'm influenced. I think honestly, like, the queer sound is very personal, right? Everyone's got a different idea of what it sounds like. You know, for me, a lot of it has been influenced by sort of the sound of like Danny Tenaglia in the 90s in New York. Is that right? You know, going to the NYC Download, that sort of classic house sound, playing, you know, parties around the world. I would say like the current iteration of it isn't where I'm at, but I also respect and like enjoy seeing people play it. But I tend not to, I don't know, I don't tend to like look for my inspiration too close to home, because then I feel like it creates a kind of smaller and smaller feedback loop. Like, it's fun to sort of put your spin on that sound, that space, that party you're playing at. And, you know, the first time I played at NYC Download, I had really no idea what I was doing. And I kind of played a set that isn't actually very download, but I remember Gideon saying to me after, like, that was one of my favorites. Kind of maybe because I didn't necessarily stick too much to the brief. So it's a kind of balancing act. But again, it's that thing of just being honest to yourself and like, what does the queer experience sound like to you? What would you want to hear on that dance floor versus what do you think you should be playing on that dance floor or making? Sorry, I hope that made some sense.
No, it definitely did. I feel like you answered it better than what I actually wanted you to answer as well. Thank you.
Perfect.
Show off.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions, by the way. Really, really great. So what's next for you on Planet Midland?
I'm making a lot of music and having a great time.
So block over, right? We're in February. So.
Yep. Block over. I mean, I didn't make music basically last year because I was getting the album ready. So yeah, just making a load of music right now. Got a growing SoundCloud playlist, which I sort of listen to out and about.
What direction are you going in?
All sorts. I'm just enjoying making some club music, you know.
Can we hear something?
I don't know. Let me see if I might have something on here. Let me see. I don't know if I have anything on here because it's all on my studio computer, isn't it? Sorry.
I thought it was a wild card.
No, I
request.
was like, is it ready? But yeah, doing that. And then, yeah, I've actually like been asked to go and like do a few talks this year like this, which is kind of a bit intimidating. But yeah, I'm going to America in April. My friends asked me to go and speak at his queer nightlife seminar at Brown, and then going to be doing some teaching later in the year, kind of sort of music-y, but like more mentor-y guidance stuff in America, in Pittsburgh, some friends, and just DJing still, obviously, to kind of push and pull, and
push and pull as in the need to DJ, or
yeah, I mean, I love DJing, but like, you know, the reality is that like, you know, I'm also I've been sort of dipping my toes quite a lot into sort of producing for other people, and again, that's what I was saying earlier about, you know, I want to be writing records, I want to be writing albums, that's my love, you know, but it takes time. And like right now it's, you know, you do like 6 sessions and 1 sticks. And so for me, it's just like realizing that like that is 5-10 year plan and just putting in the work. This year is all about work and learning the piano, just challenging myself, and just trying to like continue evolving. And I think it was Philip Glass who said, you know, he didn't start writing the music he really was proud of until his late 40s. And I think like Martin Scorsese said, like, only now is he understanding the possibilities of film in his 80s. And he's made some pretty crazy films, you know. I'm not a huge Scorsese head, but, you know, it's undeniable. And so for me, I'm just sort of like trusting the process and just not thinking like, oh, I've done this thing now, I can't ever evolve anymore. So yeah, just sort of trusting the process, putting one foot in front of the other.
And on that foot, thank you very much, Midland. Give it up, man. Amazing. Cool. So, yeah, it's all right. He's all right, isn't he? No, amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, it's great. We're really blessed to have you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so for those of you who are new, this is Open CDR Part 2 now, where the rest of the tracks that were submitted will be played. We project the name of the track on the screen. Most of the time people are here, sometimes they're not. If they are, Jameson will let you know. But above all, please meet someone new. This is a wonderful community of people who love music and great people like Harry here. And enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you so much.